Good morning. It's good to have all y'all here on this very important issue, and we hope to be able to move through the proposals of the commission fairly rapidly, and get a confirmation from the committee on what exactly we want to propose. Last week we sent a draft to all the members of the committee, and I trust that y'all all had a chance to review it. Since then, Brandy has taken in various suggestions and has worked on a modification of that. And what I thought we would do as a committee is go by section and just sort of let Brandy explain what, if any, changes were made in a section from the original, and then ask the committee if they are comfortable with that particular section as is, and then we'll move forward to the next section. My goal is to try to get as quickly as possible to the recommendations, so we can have a discussion on that. I know that there's some questions regarding a couple of the recommendations, and I want to be able to hash that out. And I know we're on a short timetable for some of the folks, including my good friends from the prosecutorial clinic, and I wanted them to be able to explain a couple of the recommendations before they had to move on. So without any further ado, first of all, since this is streamed on the internet, let me first go around the horn here. Chief, if you could start and just everyone sort of introduce yourself, who's on the committee.
My name is John King. I'm the Chief of Police of the City of Doraville Police Department.
My name is Dale Alton, and I'm the Georgia Care Connection.
My name is Travis Sackerson, and I'm the Director of the Georgia Public Defender Standards Council.
Buzz Brockway, State Representative for District 102.
Alicia Thomas Morgan, State Representative, District 39, Cobb County.
Senator Donzella James, District 35.
And Senator Unterman, who's my co-chairman, who's worked very hard on this report with me and with our staff. Unfortunately, this being the last business day before the session, we go into session on Monday, is tied up in a Senate meeting dealing with their committee on assignments. So she sends her regrets, but she's been a very integral part of that process. Also, Danny Porter, our friend from Gwinnett County and DA, is ill today, and that's why he is not able to make it. But he also had a great amount of input, and I do appreciate his thoughts that are going to be incorporated within this report as well. And with that, Brandy, let's sort of start with. I assume there's no any changes to the introduction.
There were none.
Okay.
That's correct.
All right. But we are on my. Oh no, we should be. Brandy, just to go back once again, there are no changes to the introduction?
No, sir, there's not.
Okay.
Is it on?
Section 2, the background.
Yeah. Okay. The background.
First thing, we'll go through the subject. Recent legislation, any changes you put in there?
There were no changes that I placed. If any of the commission members have anything to add.
Were there anything that any of the commission members wanted to add to the recent legislation over and above what we have in there?
I think I tried to cover everything that had been passed within the past 4 or 5 years.
Recent Section 2, recent agency and community involvement.
Okay, there is a change on page 4, and of course the drafts are numbered 1 and 2, obviously.
Yeah.
On page 4, you'll see at the top there's more information where I went into the initiative by GOSIP and Georgia Care Connection, where they were trying to collect hard data. So it goes into a lot more detail of numbers. And that continues on to page 5.
Okay. I'm going to give the commission a chance to take a quick look at that and ask if there's anything that y'all want to add to either that or any other part of that section. Any thoughts or comments? Okay.
Okay.
Let me also add that the AJC, they get knocked around a little bit from time to time. Legislators like to knock the press likes to knock the AJC. But they did have a couple of outstanding articles since the last meeting, and I do. Is there a reporter here from AJC? That didn't come. Well, I was actually going to say something nice, and I still will. I thought that the series that they did was excellent. and I thought that it sort of highlighted some of the points that we had raised in our meeting earlier, and I think that it was a good public service, and the need for additional hard data so that we make sure that we're spending the money in the right places to combat this horrible problem is extremely important, and I just wanted to tell them I think they did a great public service. So somebody else, can sort of convey that I said a nice thing about my friends at the AJC. All right.
Okay. Under the heading on 5, or the subheading on Barton Child Law and Policy Center, the last sentence, I just added, I received a copy of the prosecutor toolkit that was mentioned in the previous meeting, so that will be included in the appendices.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
And then on the bottom of page 6 in the original draft, I did not have the information from the gentleman from the Roswell Rotary. His information will now be included, as well as a copy of his handout in the appendices.
Okay.
Let's see. After that, in the committee findings, the current legal landscape.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay, actually it's on page 9 under criminal provisions addressing demand. There is a clarification in the last sentence that currently when the traffickee is a minor, then the trafficker is required to register with the sex offender registry. However, if the traffickee is an adult, current Georgia law does not require them. And that was brought to us by Joseph Drolet of the Attorney General's office. Just a clarification on that.
Okay.
All right. And then there is further expansion, or there were some changes, I guess, on the long-term recommendations. I was just trying to tighten those up after I received the information from GOSEF regarding the hard data.
Okay.
But that's pretty much the only changes between 1 and 2.
Okay. Sort of going back to the committee, if I may. I asked whether or not anyone had any additions or changes they want to do to the introduction section. Section 2, the background information. Anybody have any thoughts on anything that needs to be added or deleted from that or changed from that? Anyone? Sort of moving to the heart of the matter, then the committee findings, the current legal landscape, anything that anyone believes needs to be changed or altered regarding that section? Criminalization of domestic minor sex trafficking, anything needs to be added to that or changed on that? Right here. I'm sorry, page 7. We're on page 7. My apologies.
9 of version 2, page 7 of version 1.
Okay, sorry, looking at the wrong.
7 of
I'm sorry, page 9. All right, any thoughts on changes on criminal provisions addressing demand? Sure.
And I don't know what section it would be, but I don't recall seeing.
Just tell folks what page you're talking
I don't know yet.
about. Okay.
From our previous meeting, we had talked about what was not addressed in House Bill 200, but what Representative Neal discussed regarding previous cases where kids had already been adjudicated and they weren't able to use the affirmative defense. I believe that's the correct language.
Yeah.
So did we address that?
We do in the committee findings.
Okay.
Um,
Where is that?
That'll be page 11 in our recommendations. Number 2.
Okay.
Right.
Great.
Page 11, item 2 will be addressing that issue.
Okay.
Good point, though.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
did we
talk about international trafficking coming to this international state of Georgia? Because someone mentioned us being with the world's busiest airport, and how child trafficking is promoted here in the state of Georgia. A lot of young people are left off. Is that any?
I actually tried to, if we had any hard data, then I included it in the report. If it was mentioned by testimony from one of our witnesses, then it is referred to. If I got a hard copy of their testimony, it will be in the appendices, and I will refer to it. However, the report only deals with data that mentions a specific report or something like that.
Can I give you something?
Oh, yes, ma'am. Yes,
okay,
ma'am, definitely.
Because there is one big problem that we have here in Georgia and the airport here, and that's that children are not required to show any kind of picture ID or any kind of birth certificate if you're traveling with an adult. And it's been rumored that many children who are kidnapped or taken from other places come to Georgia with someone who says that they're, and it's only one airline that asks for NID, and that's when they get a discount ticket, and that's Southwest. But other than that, they don't. And the children can travel with these adults. So I wanted that in here somehow. So
I think perhaps, let me ask you this, would it be appropriate for us to, under the section of collection of hard data,
Okay.
Perhaps include there additional investigation needs to be made regarding the transportation of minors and the need for identification when traveling by air.
right, the only thing that they have is when they do a passport to go to another country.
And I understand, and I'm not real sure, to be honest with you. I don't know if we have the data necessary to determine if that's really something that's needed, but it certainly should be something that we should simply put down as something that needs to be additional investigation.
I have some information. I did some research, so I'll give it to you,
That's
and then
fine.
we can
We'll
see
add
if
it
we
up.
can put it. Thank
Can I
you.
ask a follow-up question about that?
Yeah, let me get the folks who got their lights lit.
Oh, we're using
Chief.
lights.
I just wanted to add that Tapestry is an organization that works with international and they might be a good resource for information.
Okay.
Chief, you have
Yes,
something
we
you
can.
want to add?
I would also mention that perhaps we ought to not leave just the monitoring or the data collection just for airline travels, because in my in the international community that I serve in the Beaufort Highway Corridor, that mode of transportation is going to be usually bus to the small bus companies and even the large bus companies, and we've seen a lot of the movement that in that way. We haven't seen a lot of criminal, and we've seen other criminal activity taking place, but it seemed to, especially in the international community, tends to move via bus.
Good point. Brandy, why don't you sort of just suggest for all transportation,
Okay.
all commercial transportation. Representative?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a clarifying question.
Can I ask if we can sort of stay on this issue for is this pertaining to?
It was an international
Okay, that's good.
question.
I just want to make sure it was.
On page 6, I remember when I was reading the two examples from the Victims of Violence Project, the second case, it's not very clear that this was a sex trafficking case. So I wasn't sure if those details were missed or if this was relevant for the report.
I think that was primarily a labor.
Yeah, it was a
Labor, not a sex trafficking.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Any other thoughts, Senator James? That's a great thing to add.
Thank you.
And we'll be happy to add that to the report. Any other thing that need to be added on that issue? I like the suggestions. All right. Moving on to committee recommendations. Wait a minute, I want to order. So let's stay with committee findings real briefly. Anything else that needs to be added regarding criminal provisions for human traffickers. Anything? All right. Moving on to the recommendations. First one, and I tell you what, I do have a draft of the bill. Oh, Chief, do you have?
Oh, I'm sorry, sir. Go on, sir, and I was going to make a comment about the recommendation that we had on page 12.
Okay. Well,
subparagraph.
mandate for posting the National Human Trafficking Hotline number. That is a bill that we're going to be dropping this particular year. Any thoughts on that paragraph? Is that fine? Okay. Next one, number 2, regarding Representative Neal's proposal. That sort of touches on what the representative was concerned about regarding expungement issues. Any thoughts on that? Any changes on that? I tell you what, going back to the mandate on human trafficking, I will put a draft and attach it as an exhibit.
Okay.
I'll get that to you today, as a matter of fact. Move on to number 3, pass the Child Protection and Public Safety Act, also known as the Juvenile Code rewrite. Senator James, in particular, I want to make sure that you are part of this, because we got it out of the House last time.
You're right.
All right. She's going to be able to point something that we didn't get out of this House at the moment. Yeah, I know that.
It's usually the other way around.
I knew that. I knew that was coming, and quite frankly, it was well deserved. What goes around comes around. Number 4, require a 30-day in jail minimum and the publishing of the name in the legal organ of a county for a person charged with disorderly conduct.
Mr. Chair, this is I went and did a little bit of research and discussed this issue with the prosecutors, the local prosecutors who handle a lot of prosecutions in the cities around me, and a couple of the chiefs. And it tends, a lot of these situations, and I thought I wanted to make sure it was just not my agency that was doing this, but that a lot of these prosecutions, especially because they're so difficult in dealing with language barriers, cultural barriers, a lot of times it's very difficult to prosecute the trafficker. So a lot of times the charges get changed, end up to loitering, solicitation, public solicitation for whatever sex acts are being solicited. So a lot of these are being, the appearances is that a lot of these are being handled as misdemeanors. In every operation that we try to do, you not only do you have to go, especially if you're doing an operation in dealing with prostitution, not only do you have to go and target the women or the men who are engaging, but you also have to go after the customer base, the consumers of this. And it's if you don't go after the people who are enabling the criminal activity, I think we're missing a big point of this. So this was an effort, and it obviously has got to be turned into some kind of legislation. But basically, hold the people who are participating, the enablers, put their feet to the fire and hold them more responsible by 30-day mandatory in the county jail. And then going after assets. I like the idea of the assets and using those assets, to fund some of the other needs that this problem requires.
Okay. I guess I've put myself in the position of being representing an unpopular a group here.
Let me start off by saying that I started my legal career doing a fair amount of criminal defense work, and that's the job of a criminal defense lawyer.
Right. Well, I have a gift. People have told me for everything. So, all right. I guess the weeds, getting into the weeds of what this would look like, because every disorderly conduct, there are a lot of different kinds of disorderly conduct. First of all, and so if every disorderly conduct carries a mandatory minimum of 30 days, and you have some of these other requirements, and the prosecution can't make their case, I don't think a lot of people are going to be pleading to disorderly conduct anymore. They'll be pleading to something else, I assume. And so I understand the frustration. Because like I said, I've been on both sides of this, and I know. I mean, I've worked several of these cases with Chief King in another life as a prosecutor, and so I know the frustrations that they have with that. And so I was just, I think that when you get down to the details of what that would look like, I would be interested to see what that would look like. But I would be concerned if every disorderly conduct now had to carry that, regardless of whether it was related to a reduction from human trafficking charges.
What could we do in terms of the language here that would, what could we add here that would either allay your concerns, or, quite frankly, this is a study committee, and so if this is simply a point that the committee would like to move forward on, but you have continuing concerns on, and this goes to everyone else on the committee as well, if there's a point that you have concerns about, I'm going to ask you to sort of provide us with an addendum, with for want of a better term, a minority report on your concern. On
I can't just throw bombs. I have to be positive.
Yeah, you have to, and you have to be able to sort of articulate it so that
Right.
so that when the folks in the General Assembly and the outside community get the report, they can see the concerns, so that we can, perhaps if we don't fully address them here, they will be addressed down the road. So, is there a particular language that we have here that you'd like to see altered, or is it something that you think would be best put into an addendum from you?
Well, again, I think that's. I think that from a practical standpoint, it's going to be difficult to, if you can't prove certain elements of your crime, then the prosecution is forced to have to. They have to plead it to a certain reduced charge. Then I think folks are going to go to trial probably, and they'll probably win too if you know going in you can't prove certain elements of the crime. And although these cases are generally human trafficking, they're mixed up in a lot of other crimes as well that
Sure.
that are all horrible crimes. I don't want to make light of that either, but I'm not sure how you would necessarily do that, but I'm sure that we can look at that going forward.
Okay. I got my friends here from the prosecutorial clinic. You got any thoughts on that before I ask the committees for what their recommendation is?
Yes, sir. Keep in mind, when you start talking about charges that have been reduced to disorderly conduct, for instance, that's usually been based on some sort of factual or legal difficulty in prosecuting the cases. Now, while I hate to openly agree with the public defenders in a public hearing, there may be some problematic aspects to mandating that in a disorderly conduct statute. If some sort of recommendation needs to come out of here, it probably needs to at least be drawn more narrowly that if we're going to reduce a case from human trafficking to disorderly conduct, that maybe there be some sort of mandatory minimum 30 days. But that's certainly not the position we're taking. I submit if you've had to reduce a human trafficking case down to disorderly conduct, there's some substantial issue with the case, both either factually or legally. So, you start kind of tying our hands from the discretionary standpoint about how to dispose of the cases. What you may end up with is a case that's dismissed because you put this mandatory minimum jail time in it, that had you left us the flexibility to craft a sentence that was appropriate, you may still get some sort of remedy and fashioning that could have been something less than dismissal. So I think maybe some of the other recommendations, for instance, like the addition of convictions to the sexual registry, or sex offender registry, may be better mechanisms for where I think the committee's going.
Y'all give me 2 seconds. I got a suggestion. Somebody's typing quick. I like the fact that it's in here, but I do recognize some of the ambiguity here. This is what I've added at the end with y'all's. And let me ask what the committee thinks. I like the fact that it's in here, and I think it's a topic that needs to be explored further. But I do think that your point is making. This is what I've added at the end. However, further investigation of how this would impact prosecution of human traffickers needs to be explored before specific legislation can be recommended. I think it needs to be in the report. I think it needs to be highlighted that this is something we see as a concern. We don't have a specific answer yet, but we do think it's something that needs to be addressed. Any thoughts on that?
I think the felony statutes are very, I think they're effective in dealing with the felonies. I think we're starting to see the mechanism in dealing with the girls. But I think we really need to seriously think about how do we deal with the customers. If it's a supply and demand issue in a lot of respects, and because the traffickers are businessmen, they are engaging in the trafficking of human beings, and if we don't deal with the customers, and we're not going to change that dynamic on the supply and demand. And that's why I made a suggestion, and I know it's probably a pretty harsh suggestion, but if you're going to have a deterrent effect to any kind of initiative, it's got to sting.
I think it needs to be in there as something that needs to be explored further.
Yes.
We're not going to be able to come up with resolution on every issue, and to simply take it out, I think, would be a step in the wrong direction.
Thank you, sir.
But since we can't come up with something specific, and there are some practical prosecutorial concerns and defense concerns, I think simply putting down here something in our recommendations that'd be further explored. Any other thoughts on that? You okay, Senator?
Mr. Chair and everyone, in the 2001 Sexual Child Commerce Act, it gave the judge the opportunity to give up to 20-year sentences for not only pimps but panderers as well. So for the Johns, as we call it. So would that not be enough, or do we need to look at that law that's already on the books and maybe strengthen it?
Well, I think that's part of it, is that we need to see whether or not, whether the act, when they reduce it down to a misdemeanor of some sort, what can be done in order to further provide a deterrent to this sort of conduct. That's what we're trying to address here.
Okay, well, my DA from Douglas County, I represent Douglas County, Mr. McDade is here, who is also, I think, the chairman of the DA. So we just had a case in Douglas County with 2 boys that were trafficked. And can I ask him?
No, you certainly
There-
can't.
there
Of
he-
course you can. I'm sorry, I'm being flippant. I'm having a little fun on a very serious issue. But, Mr. Dade, it's always a pleasure to have you here, and I look forward to seeing you many times over the next 40 business days.
Likewise.
Do you have anything you can add to this?
I just commend the committee for taking up this issue. There are some very difficult decisions that have to be made in these types of cases. But I kind of concur with what Mr. Speos and Mr. Sackerson previously said.
Yeah.
If a prosecutor is going to be reducing a case down from human trafficking down to something along the lines of what you're discussing, there's got to be substantial problems with the case as far as the prosecution side of it.
Yeah.
If we have evidence to support the human trafficking charge, as you know, we'll go forward on it and hammer that rascal as hard as we can hammer him.
Sure. And I know you would. You're one of the best in the state. Any thoughts? Any about this section with my addition to it? Any? I'm going to go ahead, since there was a discussion on it, I'm going to ask for a vote on this one. All those in favor with my...
Can I have
Yes,
discussion?
absolutely.
I just want to add that I totally agree with that we need to look at the demand, because we can help every single road there is, but they will find more if there's demand out there. So we do need to look at this. I thought there was some discussion on looking at John's schools. And did I miss that in here as an option?
Looking at what now?
John schools, there's some states that have a program
Mhm.
on first offenders having to go through a program. And then there's also been discussion on sometimes when they are found to be guilty, that they put their pictures up in newspapers or on
Mhm.
local internet. And so maybe those are two options to consider while we're looking at this, just to throw out there to consider.
If you'll look at number 7, it's regarding mugshots of persons in the local legal organ.
Okay, so it is another recommendation. How about the John schools?
If it was not specific, if a commission member didn't specifically tell me, it is not included. However, if it was mentioned in testimony, it will be in the appendices. I can always add it, though.
Okay.
That's why it's not in the current version,
Okay.
because a member
I
didn't
think
tell me.
somebody did bring it up when we were discussing, but I may be wrong.
No, I don't think
So
so.
they didn't. Well, I'd like
No,
to
but
offer
it should have
Look
been.
at John
All right.
schools.
Okay.
If you could work on some, while we work our way through, we'll try to get some language before we get to the end of this. That's good. Any other thoughts on section 4? Are we comfortable with the language now as written? Okay.
Chairman, are you okay with me moving that to long-term recommendations?
Yes.
Since we said that, okay.
Yes, that makes sense. Number 5, provide underage victims of human trafficking with the same provisions received by victims for child molestation regarding the tolling of statute of limitations. I know we've got some disagreements there.
Well, we had, Mr. Chairman, I thank you for, I assume you were recognizing me by looking at me and smiling. So, again, it puts me in a very difficult position. I think there is a statute of limitations there now, and there for a reason. The cases, and I don't want to let my anecdotal experiences overwhelm my point of view on this, but I know a great many cases involve other crimes where they have extended. I mean, there'll be child molestation charges or other things that may be attached to some of these things. But I think in my experience that the 4 or 5 cases that I'd worked either with Chief King or some other examples, that the human traffickers we're referring to were either parents, unfortunately, or they were women. It was not your typical. It's not the face that you see. So all the experiences that I'd had that they may have been madams or whatever else, and so I say that because that relates to 2 of the issues that we had raised. I sent Brandy something in writing about a couple of our concerns that dealt with both the statute of limitations and registering as a sex offender. That both of those that from the statute of limitations standpoint, I think it's there for a reason. It's there so that when you lose witnesses down the road that may protect the defendant's side of the argument, you raise something 10, 20 years, there may be one, it may not be necessary because there are certain other crimes that may be related to it, so that you can use the lack of statute of limitations on those crimes. And then on the specific issue, there may be defense problems down the road in defending those folks. I know it's probably a very unpopular position to take, but I feel like we had to at least address it.
Sure. Let me ask you this from a public policy standpoint, and I'm going to ask my friends from the prosecutors to also comment. We've already established a public policy of extending statute of limitations when it comes to molestation. Why should we have a separate statute of limitations for sex trafficking as opposed to molestation? Tell me why we should have 2 different measures.
Well, and like I said, I've had experiences where it could be, it could be parents, and it could be crimes that went on for a very long time that were related to other horrible things, and so that, obviously, other than to say that maybe you're duplicating some of the other overlap with other crimes, I've seen it both ways. I just felt like we needed to raise the issue.
I understand. I appreciate that. Mr. Spaz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This time I can honestly say I disagree with the public defender, so I'm just glad to get to that point. historically, if you look at it, the tolling of the statute of limitations concepts that have come about in child molestation cases and other sexual assault cases, they kind of predate the human trafficking concepts and the human trafficking bills. And I think you'll see the same thing about the registry and the sex offender registry, that those things have been established as policies in this state for quite some time. As we all know, we've only recently taken the serious stance in the positions that we've done about human trafficking as it was become a reality in Georgia. So I think a lot of what you're going to see is we're just trying to, the recommendation is to put these victims in line with these same concepts we've had. Understand kind of how this happens sometimes. You're talking about taking a child that is a victim of human trafficking and saying that the statute of limitation doesn't start to run on that because they're a child at the time that they're a victim, which is the same thing we do in child molestation cases. What happens sometimes is there may be an arrest or an investigation, long-term investigation and what have you, where 3, 4, 5, 10 years after that victim had been the victim of human trafficking, there's an arrest and a long-term investigation, and that there's evidence that comes up that there's other victims that had existed in the past that then come forward or are discovered during investigations, those kind of concepts. So what this does is it says, you know, if at some later date there's actually a prosecution that can be had, then you shouldn't be barred from prosecuting those cases that involve children a long term ago. So as far as defending those cases, you know, the length of time that has transpired between an incident and the time of prosecution is subject to cross-examination. Both sides argue about the validity of the evidence. I mean, all of that still takes place in an adversarial process. So all this does is say if you're a child victim of this as opposed to child molestation, then there should not be a bar to prosecution on statute of limitations. If it's good for child molestation, it should be good for human trafficking for sexual servitude.
You did that last year in House Bill 1176.
Yeah.
You gave an unlimited statute of limitations, so I guess I'm not understanding what y'all are suggesting. So it was changed last year.
Okay.
Well, good. We must have done a good job of defending that concept last year.
We disagreed last year, right?
All right. We're going to move that. We disagree. We did disagree. I now recall that. Do me a favor. Put that in. Put that all the way back to previous legislative action.
Okay.
Sometimes we get lost in these things. Number 6, ensure that convicted human traffickers for sexual servitude when the victim is an adult are added to the sex offender registry. I know that we also have some disagreements on that with our friends from the public defenders. As a matter of fact, we will be attaching this as an addendum. Some thoughts on that before I ask the committee's positions on that.
And again, I think most of them are here, but our concern, most of the drive behind the registration is to, and it looks like that there is a certain amount of registration anyway, and so I'll go ahead and bring that up on the front end now. But and certainly some of the overlapping crimes already require registration, so this would just be for this specific instance that the motive, what drives people, the thing that we want to warn people of with the registry for sexual predators and possibly the motives for sexual trafficking, human trafficking, excuse me. One may be a financial motive and one may be a predatory motive. And so I'm not sure that there's been a link established between why, other than necessarily it being punitive, that you would want to link the two, but I just felt like we needed to raise that issue as well.
Okay. Chuck, you want to address that?
What the distinction is there's a catch-all in the registry that involves any crime involving the child. So if there was a child victim in this case, and that's what results in the conviction, then they're currently required to register. And I think I see Mr. Jolay's head checking yes or no, or yes. But what this does is says if a person is convicted of trafficking and their victim had been an adult, had been 18 or 19 years old at the time, then this new provision would also require them to be registered. So that's the expansion of the registry, is just to that. So right now you're required to register somebody because the victim was a child. This would be if the victim was of age at the time of conviction.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that? You comfortable with that more narrow explanation? Or more comfortable with it?
Yeah, I just wanted to, this might be some of my ignorance of how the registering sex offenders works. I mean, this is, if you're trafficking an adult, is that sort of getting away from what the sexual register was meant to do? I mean, is it, as a public service, it's meant to notify, neighbors that one of your neighbors has molested a child in the past. Are we starting to get away from that if we include people who traffic humans? And and if that's what we want to do, then that's fine. But is it sort of muddy the waters? I guess is what I'm trying to say in the public's mind, that all sorts of different crimes are wrapped up in the sex offender registry.
Mr. Space, you want to address that?
I could. Well, first of all, there are probably a large, or not a majority, but a large portion of the sex offenses do involve adults, rape and that kind of thing. Now, their convictions are required to be registered. This is narrowly tailored to the subject having to have been trafficked for sexual servitude. So we're not talking about labor trafficking or anything else. So now you're talking about a conviction took place. There was a conviction that involved sexual servitude. Okay. And Ms. Travis and I have talked about practically what this would look like. Most likely what we would do is say, if you are convicted for human trafficking, and sexual servitude is what was involved, regardless of whether it's an adult or child, you would be required to register. And that would just clarify that.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Any other thoughts from the committee? What's the committee's pleasure on this? Although, any objections at this point? You still have concerns?
Well, obviously we have a certain position. I think we.
Okay, I understand it, and I appreciate that. We will attach it as addendum. Let me go ahead and ask the committee to simply vote on that issue. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? I understand. We'll attach this, or for that matter, if you want to add something else to it, we'd be happy to. Number 7, require that the mugshot of a person who has been convicted of human trafficking be published in the legal organ of the county in which the person resides. Any concerns about that issue?
Mr. Chairman, a bill on the floor to, because right now the mugshots, are they found guilty before their mugshot is put there, or when they're arrested?
Yeah, that's a separate issue, but it's an important one. There is concerns about folks whose mugshots, when they are simply arrested, being published on the internet. That's a sort of a separate issue. This only deals with convictions.
Okay, because I know someone is some company that's charging people money to get their mugshots off.
Yeah, they're first putting it on and then allowing you to pay to take it off.
Pay like $5,000 or something, and then it might go back on somebody else's.
Yeah.
So then you have to do it again.
I've been out of law school for a while. That sounds awfully close to extortion to me.
Me too.
But yeah.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts on that issue? Any other concerns raised? All right, we'll move on.
I guess it's more practical when the bill to do this gets introduced. We are in the information age. It may be much more valuable to have it on the internet, in addition to just published in the county legal organ.
I think that's a good point.
That's something that we can address when the bill moves forward.
And if
I know I don't read. I'm not an attorney, so I don't generally sit around and read my county legal organ when it comes out. It normally goes right in the recycling bin, but
I don't either. I have a paralegal who does that.
And I don't hire anybody to do either. So.
Let's try this. That's a good point. We might as well, since this is a study group, I like to put ideas into things. How about after in the legal organ add and comma if appropriate comma the internet. Rather do that though. How after county legal organ of the county, and then put in the and comma if appropriate the internet.
This is a good
Well,
business
after
for somebody.
county we have in which the person resides, so.
But all right, do it all the way at the end. Do it all the way at the end. You're right. You're right. There you go. Any other thoughts on that?
I don't want to belabor the point, Mr. Chairman, but I do want to ask, when you use the word appropriate, who determines that, and does that become consistent across counties?
Well, that's what I'm trying to simply put in there at the present time, Representative, is the fact that it ought to be something that ought to be taken up when the legislation is drafted.
Gotcha.
That's what I'm simply trying to do at this point.
Okay.
Legal Oregon is definite. When it is or is not appropriate, that's something that's going to have to be hashed out in greater detail.
Okay, thank you.
Since, our job here is to sort of float thoughts, and I just want to make sure that that's not something that's not looked at later. Number 8, provide instructional services for minors who are victims of human trafficking. We have some of that language already in HB 200. Someone's recommendation, can we flesh that out a bit more? Senator James? We have some of this already at HB 200, and I just sort of need some additional fleshing out on what you're looking to do.
I have to look at it first. Can I ask Ms. Karn?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Ms. Karn, come. Let me tell you.
Yes, some of it is included in HB 200, however, there is there can be a discontinuation of instructional services for those children who do not have or are not given appropriate funding for the continuation of their educational services. And so it would be an assurance that those children whose funding would be discontinued would not be discontinued, that they would be able to complete their education process.
Well, since it's rather broad at this point, Senator, let me recommend that we move it to long-term recommendations, and simply put in there investigate needed expansion of instructional services for minors who are victims of human trafficking.
Okay.
I'm trying to keep this section sort of tight with things that we know we can move forward. We've already, moving to long-term recommendations, we're already going to move number 4 above into this section. Next, the first section listed here is continue efforts to reduce the demand. Any thoughts on this section?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
The one piece, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The one piece that I did not see in here that I would like added for discussion purposes is, I think it was Kirsten from the Barton Clinic, when you talked about how many of the abusers were abused themselves. And so I would like something included in our discussion about what we could do to prevent boys, and whether it's educating them early on or preventing them from even becoming Johns, particularly those who have been abused. So looking at, what are some of the indicators early on. All of you prevention folks would know what to do here, but I do want to add that to the discussion.
Good point. Perhaps it might even do continue efforts to reduce demand. A new paragraph at the end of that section that simply adds, help me out here.
Prevention. I mean, we talked a lot about prevention.
Yeah.
And it's not on here.
At all.
I'd love to see that out as a focus of preventive
Okay.
measures for boys and girls.
Okay. Would what the representative was discussing be better in a separate section dealing with prevention?
Well, maybe it could be in both. I mean, I think a separate section for prevention I would suggest that is a separate
Okay.
section. Prevention is needed for boys and
All right.
girls. I think there was a lot of discussion in there.
All right. Let me try to deal with this section first. Additional investigation. All right, I'm not wedded to the language here. If someone can come up with a better way to phrase this, I appreciate it. First off, regarding Representative Morgan's recommendation, adding a line of sentence, a paragraph rather, at the end of section 1 here. Additional investigation of ways to address the frequency of abused victims becoming abusers themselves as an adult needs to be undertaken. Can anybody give me a better way to say what I just said? If not, we're going to go with that.
Can I just add particularly with boys?
Well, isn't there a problem with both sexes? I think I've seen investigations in which it involve both girls and boys. So I wouldn't want to limit it for that reason.
Okay. I agree with that.
Anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I do think traffickers are both male and female.
Yeah.
Additional.
Chief, anything you wanted to add to that?
No, sir. I think we, for simplicity purposes, and then that way we don't delete the effort. I think it needs to be addressed, especially obviously these efforts are going to have to take place at a very early age, and I think clarity, especially when dealing with children, both males and females, I think it's important.
You wanted to, this is a good place to go ahead and add the language that you wanted to add. We'll add a new 2.
I would just like to see a long-term recommendation on looking in preventive programs for victims, reaching them before they become the at-risk youth.
Give me some language.
I would have to work on that.
I'll tell you what, let's try to, I want to try to get the language down as best we can. Sort of flesh out your thoughts to me for a minute right here. How good a scribe I am off the top of my head.
I think it goes in terms of looking at prevention awareness and education in schools and ongoing support groups for at-risk youth. We could look into some of those as some of the things I was thinking about, as well as adults and our immigration population. Prevention, I think the people that have been working in this area, we've all learned that we need to put some more emphasis in not having this happen to our youth. Once it happens, it's a horrible experience and it's very difficult to recover from. It's a lot of mental health care that needs to be provided. So if we can get the children at risk, if you look at our numbers, we've had almost a large number of at-risk referred to us, and one of our goals is to refer them to services so they never become CSEC. And I guess that's what I'm getting to. Some more collaborative efforts to do that.
So far, all I got is a title, which is prevention awareness needs to be addressed.
You spoke a lot.
Senator, any thoughts on?
And basically, that's what number 8 was intended to do, to educate the young people, to heal them. Healing is something that we, don't focus enough on, and these young people go right back into the situation even after they're 21. So we wanted to basically educate them and give them all the medical attention, get them out of the environment that they're in, and not, DFACS doesn't really provide anything. Even Angela's house is closed now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Let me ask you this: looking at 8, go back up, which we're going to move into long-term recommendations, where the title is investigate expansion of instructional services for minors who are victims of human trafficking. Does that incorporate your concerns?
It does incorporate some of it, and I guess a step in it would be to survey to see what we have and what the gaps are, and then to develop prevention programs.
Actions include. Come again with that one more time.
I was going to say maybe a step in it would be to survey to see
Yeah,
what prevention programs are there. Katie Jo, do you want to speak on that? Governor's office has worked on this in the task
Actions
force.
include survey of present programs.
Determine what the gaps are, and then coordinated effort.
Determination of gaps in present services. And what was the last part? And implementation of
Collaborative efforts.
and
to serve.
collaborative efforts to fill those gaps. How about that?
Katie Jo can speak to that better. I'm
Okay.
sure.
I'm not sure what language you've quite drafted there, but number 8, for example, is for current victims.
Yeah.
And from what I thought you were saying was more preventative efforts, so I just wanted to make a distinction on
Understand.
those 2 items.
Investigate expansion of instructional services for minors who were victims of human trafficking, who were victims or potential victims.
And then
Hold on. I'm not that good at spell. All right. How about that for a title? Investigate expansion of instructional services for minors who are victims or potential victims of human trafficking. And then we go into the language. I'm going to sort of read it the way it'll be, and then I'm going to ask you for what additions we can do to it. I appreciate you being here today. Thank you. For child victims of human trafficking and or commercial sexual exploitation, appropriate instructional services and support shall be provided to the child for the education that was lost during the time of his or her abuse in order that the child may have a viable opportunity to fulfill his or her potential. Actions include survey of present programs, determination of gaps in present services, and collaborative efforts to fill those gaps. What do we need to add?
Okay. I just have some food for thought, some concerns here.
Sure.
As you're talking about victims who have, been out of school during their victimization, and then we're trying to catch them up to the grade level they should be on. I see that as something very different from children who are at risk, and we're trying to show them the signs of how to spot a John, or helping to build their self-confidence in order to not become a victim in the first place. I just don't want to get those 2 things mixed up, because the preventative, the educational side is going to be very, very costly, whereas the preventative might be a cost that will help prevent us from incurring those costs later on.
Good point. Good point.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
can I ask her something?
Sure.
Isn't it true, though, that most of the young people who find themselves in becoming a victim of trafficking are usually those who are not concerned about school or who already have problems? So, they're in the same category.
Yes, ma'am. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't trying to. I wanted to separate the 2 things.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's
How?
go back. Let's go back to your point, and then I'm going to see if this
Okay.
doesn't fit. In addition, programs need to be developed to, if you would, identify to assist potential victims. To assist potential victims, help me out with specific language from here. You gave it to me a moment ago. You just got to tell me again.
I mean, I would think the key things would be helping them identify
How to spot a John.
how to spot a John, or identifying what healthy relationships are, or building self-confidence,
Okay.
Self-esteem.
self-esteem.
Mr. Chairman, is there no one here from a future not parent?
Anybody?
The work that they do is, I'm sure they can speak to it very clearly.
Anybody here from Future Not a Past?
Since this is a long term, I guess we can work on that. Right?
Yeah. I'm just trying to get some language down there to get things
Sure.
started. Potential abusers and.
Chairman?
Yeah.
Can I speak with her?
Hmm?
Can I ask her?
Yeah, sure.
I'd like to know if we can include both in here, the ones who need the help because they already been victims, and not separate it, because this is a guide for us to look at possible legislation or changing some policies or strengthening some policies that we do have. So I know you said you want to separate them. So did you want to make a 8 and 9, or is it some way, the way Mr. Chairman has provided new language, it seems that it would include both, and it's not pooling both, saying that they're the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I just want, from what I was understanding was that we were trying to catch girls up to grade level, which is different to me than teaching them the skills not to get into the life.
Let me try this.
Okay.
To move it along. Once again, and we can separate it out into two parts if y'all feel like I've lumped too much together. So that's not a problem. I'm just trying to say, all right, investigate expansion of instructional services for minors who are victims of human trafficking or potential victims, who are victims or potential victims of human trafficking. Let me just tell you how it would read. For child victims of human trafficking and or commercial sexual exploitation, appropriate instructional services and support shall be provided. Need to be provided. Need to be provided to the child for the education that was lost during the time of her abuse, in order that the child may have a viable opportunity to fulfill her potential. Same section, but additional paragraph. In addition, programs need to be developed to assist potential victims in identifying potential abusers and enhancing enhancing educational opportunities and other avenues to enhance self-esteem.
I like that.
Yeah. In addition, programs need to be developed to assist potential victims in identifying potential abusers and in enhancing educational opportunities and other avenues to enhance self-esteem. And then the last sentence for the section would read, additional investigation of ways to address the frequency of abuse victims. Hold on. I'm sorry. The last sentence should read, actions include survey present programs, determination of gaps in present services, and collaborative efforts to fill those gaps. How's that sound, guys?
I do think the second and the third are different than the first, because the first you're working with catching kids up who we already have in the system.
Mm-hmm.
The second one you're trying to prevent those kids ever from getting in the system.
Yeah. So I'm trying to address both of them.
Okay. And the same thing.
I mean, we can divide it out if necessary. I tell you what, let's divide them out. Go back to what we were doing originally, Randy. In which simply case we simply say, investigate expansion of instructional services for minors who are victims of human trafficking. That's section 1. That's one section. And the other section should read, address instructional services for minors who are potential victims of human trafficking.
Can I request that we use some different language for that section?
Sure. What would you like to work on?
I just think the word prevention is important. 'Cause there's one piece about giving instructional services for victims.
Okay.
Then there's another conversation about preventing abuse by focusing on those who have been previously abused, as well as those who are I don't like to use the word at risk, but who should be high priority based on certain indicators. So that language is important, I think, because of the work that I'm aware that already goes on. Girls who are, there's a conversation that needs to be had about, we don't do anything that I'm aware of for boys who have been abused, who could become abusers when they are adults. And the services that we are doing for girls are prevention in terms of, what are they running away? Are they in the system in some way? Do they have some other social factors that may lead them to becoming victim? So I agree with you, and I think everybody's in agreement that we're keeping this separate. But I think the second piece is about prevention services.
So should the
or
title
prevention
be
programming?
We
Okay.
simply explore prevention programs for minors who are at risk.
You wanted to use another?
Yeah. I don't, maybe somebody else has another term for at risk. I just have an issue with it, but I could get over that if that's the best way to describe it.
Don't let pursuit of the perfect defeat the good.
That's the way they've been described so far.
What?
We can come up, we do describe them at risk.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's,
Yeah.
all right. Promote prevention programs for minors who are at risk of becoming victims of human trafficking. And in that, we use the language that I put in.
Victims or perpetrators of human trafficking. Because then it puts in, we haven't said boys or girls, but, and I know that traffickers are both boys and girls.
Right.
But if you say the perpetrators and victims, then I think you cover both sides of this on the prevention. Some people are shaking their head, others are looking puzzled.
You're trying to prevent the girls from becoming victims and the boys from being abusers. So you're trying
Okay,
to
so
prevent-
that's what she's trying to add.
Prevent perpetrators and victims.
A potential.
Potential.
But boys could be victims too.
Right.
So,
So we didn't say boys or girls, we just said prevent
Yeah. Okay.
perpetrators and victims. And no gender associated with that.
I like to separate those two issues, though.
Yes.
The victims and the perpetrators, I think both deserve to look into and get services to stop both, but I think they need to be separated. I would suggest.
All right.
I do too.
We're gonna deal with one section at a time.
Yeah,
All right.
it could be section
We've
three.
got the section dealing with the actual victims down, right? The next section will be promote prevention programs for minors who are at risk of becoming victims of human trafficking. That one will read, programs need to be developed to assist potential victims in identifying potential abusers and in enhancing enhancing educational opportunities and other avenues to enhance self-esteem. I don't like using enhancing twice, but top of my head,
Not bad.
not bad.
Just the
All right.
SARS.
Any questions about that section? All right. Then a new section.
Do you want me to also have that paragraph stating actions include serving
Yes.
the president?
All right. Now, how do we deal with potential abusers?
I would suggest that if you introduce the whole notion of prevention of the next generation of potential users as a way to kind of introduce the whole notion. So a lot of people see,
That's
well,
what-
first reading was, why are we doing anything for the traffickers except for locking them
All
up?
right. So the next section should be titled provide prevention programs to
reduce the
to
next
reduce
generation of
to reduce the numbers of the next generation of sex traffickers, of human traffickers. Anybody want to help me with the language? By the way, this is how legislation works. What's the
Provide educational
Like making
programs.
sausage.
What?
Can you just say provide educational programs
Yeah.
in this, to assist in this area?
Keep it simple, that's it.
That's right. Well, got it? All right. Everybody okay with those 3 sections? All right. Last section. Collection of hard data with what the state of Georgia is currently dealing with when it comes to human trafficking. Take a look at that.
I think this whole section needs to be rewritten. We should do it right now.
Delegate that task to you?
Do it on the fly right now, Representative, whatever you want.
Done. In as much. No, I'm just kidding.
I would like to simply add as exhibits the 2 articles from the AJC. I think that would be appropriate. I thought they were good articles. Anything else?
Mr. Chairman, I know that we've mentioned the Shapiro group and the survey. I was wondering if we could also include their report on men who buy sex for the adolescent.
I think we do.
Do we
Brandy?
have that?
Brandy.
Do we have this as part of it?
The Shapiro report.
That's, yes, that was one thing. That is one change from 1 to 2 that is mentioned under long-term recommendations. There's a short paragraph at the bottom of page 12. In the fall of 2009, the Shapiro group took 218 surveys done over a 2-month period.
But can
Because
we
that
include
was
the
part of
survey?
that. It will, if you'll look, there is a footnote 41 for more information C, and it'll say, I'll describe that and say exhibit whatever number it is.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Any other potential changes? We subject to the final drafting, in which case I will send it out to you. We've gone over the details of the report. Let me ask for a yay or nay. All those in favor of the final report as edited, subject to final drafting, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Welcome to how we do things in the House Judiciary Committee.